There is a version of you that you have never met. Not the version you show the world. Not the version you show your closest friends. Not even the version you believe yourself to be when you are alone. The shadow knows what the ego refuses to admit. This hidden version, the one you have spent your entire life suppressing, denying, and burying beneath layers of social performance, is, according to Carl Jung, the single most powerful and most dangerous force in your psychological life. And here is what makes it devastating. Everything you have refused to acknowledge about yourself does not disappear when you refuse to look at it. It goes underground. It operates beneath the surface of your consciousness, driving decisions you think you are making freely, sabotaging relationships you think you are building deliberately, creating patterns you cannot understand because you cannot see their source. What you refuse to face in yourself will control you from the dark. The Stoics called this the unexamined life. Jung called it the shadow. Two traditions, 2,000 years apart, both pointing at exactly the same blind spot in the human condition. Today we bring them together, and what they reveal about the man you think you are versus the man you actually are will change how you see everything. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who spent decades mapping the deepest layers of the human psyche. He was a student of Sigmund Freud and eventually broke from him completely because he believed Freud's model of the unconscious was too narrow, too focused on repressed sexuality, and missed something far more fundamental. Jung proposed that every human being carries within them a vast unconscious, not just a dumping ground for repressed memories, but an entire parallel psychological world containing archetypes, instincts, and the accumulated wisdom of the entire human species. The unconscious is not a basement, it is a universe. Within this unconscious, Jung identified what he called the shadow, the part of the personality that the conscious ego refuses to acknowledge. Every quality you judge as unacceptable in yourself, every impulse you suppress, every emotion you decide is too dangerous, too dark, or too shameful to admit. These qualities do not vanish when you suppress them. They consolidate in the shadow, growing stronger, more volatile, and more influential with every year you refuse to face them. The shadow grows in the dark. The longer you ignore it, the louder it becomes. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Read that again. What you refuse to examine will run your life, and you will mistake its influence for circumstances beyond your control. 2,000 years before Jung gave this phenomenon a name, the Stoics were already wrestling with the same truth from a different direction. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The first step, don't be anxious. Nature controls it all, and before long you'll be no one, nowhere, like Hadrian, like Augustus. The second step, concentrate on what's in front of you and look at it clearly." Self-examination was the Stoics' daily weapon. The Stoics practiced something they called prosoche, constant self-attention, not self-obsession, not self-criticism, but the disciplined, daily practice of watching your own mind with honest eyes, catching the judgments, the impulses, the reactions before they became actions. Epictetus taught his students that the root of all human suffering was not external circumstance, but internal misalignment, the gap between who we believed ourselves to be and what we actually were doing, thinking, and choosing. The Stoics saw the shadow without naming it, what neither tradition fully resolved alone. Jung could name the shadow, but his tools for integration were slow and therapeutic. The Stoics had the daily discipline, but lacked the psychological map of what they were looking for. Together, they formed something neither could build alone: a complete system, a map and a method. The shadow named, and the discipline to face it. Most men, when they hear the word shadow, imagine something purely negative: their rage, their envy, their capacity for cruelty or deception. The shadow is not just your darkness, it is your unlived potential. But Jung was clear: the shadow contains both darkness and gold. It holds the suppressed qualities that society or family taught you were unacceptable. But it also holds the unlived potential, the dormant capabilities, the aspects of yourself you abandoned because someone once told you they were too much, too intense, or too dangerous. The man who was told anger was wrong suppresses not just destructive rage, but healthy assertiveness, the ability to hold firm boundaries, the capacity to protect what matters. That too goes into the shadow. The man who was told ambition was arrogant suppresses not just ego, but genuine drive, creative fire, the relentless pursuit of excellence. That goes into the shadow too. Everything you are told to hide, including your strength. Jung identified 4 primary things most men's shadows contain. The first, suppressed emotions. Grief, fear, vulnerability, everything a man was taught made him weak. The second, rejected qualities. Aspects of personality dismissed as too sensitive, too intense, or too different from what was expected. The third, unlived potential. The writer who became an accountant, the leader who became a follower, the version of yourself that was possible but never pursued. The fourth, projected darkness. The qualities you judge most harshly in other people, because they are the qualities you most fear finding in yourself. What you cannot stand in others is what you cannot face in yourself. That last one is the most psychologically precise and the most uncomfortable. Jung called this projection the unconscious act of seeing your own shadow in the behavior of other people and reacting to it with disproportionate intensity. Here is where the shadow stops being a philosophical concept and becomes something you can recognize in your own life right now. The shadow does not announce itself, it acts through you. Have you ever reacted to something with an intensity that surprised even you? Said something in anger you didn't know you believed? Felt a sudden, irrational surge of envy towards someone you genuinely like? That is the shadow operating. Not you choosing, but the unexamined, unintegrated part of you surfacing in a moment of lowered psychological guard. Every pattern you cannot explain has a shadow at its root. Seneca observed this centuries before modern psychology existed. He wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." But he went further. He noted that men who had not examined themselves thoroughly were slaves to forces they could not name and therefore could not resist. The shadow explains why intelligent men make the same relationship mistakes repeatedly, why disciplined men sabotage their own progress at the moment of breakthrough, why ambitious men undermine their own success at the exact moment it becomes real. Self-sabotage is the shadow protecting the identity it knows. It is not weakness. It is not stupidity. It is the unintegrated shadow maintaining the psychological equilibrium it has always known, even when that equilibrium is built on limitation and pain. Jung's solution was not to destroy the shadow. It was to integrate it, to consciously acknowledge, understand, and incorporate the rejected parts of yourself into a more complete, more honest, and more powerful identity. Integration is not becoming your darkness. It is owning it so it cannot own you. The Stoics provide the method. 3 daily practices, each one a layer of shadow work dressed in Stoic language. The first practice is the evening examination. Seneca wrote every night, not as a diary, but as a courtroom. He asked himself 3 questions. What did I do wrong today? What did I do right? What could I have done better? But the shadow work goes deeper than performance review. The question is not just what did I do, but what did I feel that I immediately suppressed? What reaction did I have that I immediately judged? What impulse arose that I immediately refused to acknowledge? Those suppressed feelings are your shadow speaking. Write them down, not to act on them, but to see them. The shadow loses power the moment it enters the light of conscious awareness. The second practice is the projection audit. What you judge in others, examine in yourself. For 1 week, notice every time you feel a disproportionate negative reaction to another person. Not mild dislike, but genuine contempt, anger, or moral outrage. Write down the quality that triggered you. Then ask the question Jung considered the most important in all of psychology. Where does this quality live in me? Not as self-punishment, as honest investigation. Because the intensity of your reaction is directly proportional to the depth at which that quality lives in your own shadow. The third practice is the voluntary confrontation. Marcus Aurelius practiced this without naming it. He regularly placed himself in situations of discomfort, not to suffer, but to encounter his own reactions honestly, to watch himself under pressure and see what emerged. Deliberately enter the situations that reveal you most clearly. The conflict you have been avoiding, the conversation that makes you uncomfortable, the creative work you have been too afraid to start. The shadow dissolves in the light of deliberate action, not all at once, not painlessly, but encounter by encounter, examination by examination. The man who faces his shadow becomes harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize, and harder to control, because he has already seen the worst of himself and chosen, deliberately, who he will be anyway. Carl Jung spent his entire career trying to help people become whole, not perfect, whole. The integration of light and shadow into a single, honest, complete human being. The Stoics spent their entire tradition trying to help men become free, not comfortable, free. The freedom of a man who has examined himself so thoroughly that nothing outside him can claim what he has not already faced within him. These 2 traditions, brought together, answer the question that most men spend their entire lives avoiding. Who are you when no one is watching, and nothing is suppressing you? That is your shadow, and it is also your potential. The man who has faced his shadow cannot be controlled by it, cannot be manipulated through it, cannot be destabilized by someone who has identified it, because he has already identified it himself. You do not need to become someone new. You need to become someone complete. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. If this is the work you are ready to do, subscribe to Rise Above. New videos every Tuesday for those who refuse to remain ordinary.